Greetings, Hoops fans, and welcome to a brand new edition of Hoop Nation. Success in the NBA, and in all professional sports to be precise, is measured by results. It's all about wins, championships, personal and team achievements. Even one moment can change everything. An incredible clutch play, an unbelievable shot, an awful mistake, a brilliant coach's decision, or a bad call by the officials can make all the difference. There's a thin line between winning and losing, a thin line between success and failure. Have a look at all the preseason predictions and power rankings. You'll notice that there are teams in there that are meant to succeed, that get all the hype even before the season starts and all the praise by the media and the fans alike, and end up failing to meet those expectations. While there are teams that are initially under the radar that manage to shock the world in the process and get everyone's attention by simply winning while no one expected them to. No one expected the Heat to reach the finals last year. No one expected the Raptors to win the championship in 2019. And during the early 2021 season, there are quite a few examples of teams that have either overperformed or underperformed in the NBA so far. And in this video, we're going to talk about those teams, analyze why they've been having that surprisingly early success or disappointing early struggle, and trying to predict where they'll end up when all's said and done. Before we get started, we feel the need to express our gratitude once again to all of our loyal subscribers. And if you're not one of them yet, here's your chance to hit that subscribe button. And without further ado, let's start with the underperformers of 2020-21 so far. The first and most obvious choice here is a team that we just mentioned a few seconds ago, the Miami Heat, last year's finalists. They found themselves at the bottom of the Eastern Conference standings, being one of the worst teams in the league in both offensive and defensive rating, despite the fact that their defensive effort was their strong suit last year. Their underperformance can be attributed to the fact that many key players like Jimmy Butler, Tyler Hero, and Avery Bradley have missed a ton of games due to injuries or COVID-related issues. Jimmy Butler also thinks that the team's inability to make shots has a negative effect to their defensive mentality too. The Heat's skid, bad luck, and wounded mentality won't go on forever though. They have a talented roster and an exquisite coaching staff, and at full strength, they'll manage to string together the wins they need to at least enter the playoffs. The Dallas Mavericks have also failed at this point to meet their high preseason expectations. Various sources had predicted before the season started that they'd finish in the top 4 spots in the Western Conference. But the Mavs' performance has been quite inconsistent. Kristaps Porzingis' spirit is willing, but his knees unfortunately aren't, and he keeps struggling to remain healthy, while the wonder boy Luka Doncic continues to impress but does need some help. The Mavericks are one of the worst teams in the league regarding pace, and while they'd never lost more than 2 games in a row last year, they've already lost 5 straight this year, and their upcoming schedule is quite tough too. While they're currently in and out of the playoff picture, they're still probably going to make it to at least the play-in tournament, and Luka's definitely going to be an all-star again, but it's unlikely that this season will end up being a step forward for the organization as they hoped. Both the last 2 Eastern Conference champions have been underperforming so far in 2020-21. The Toronto Raptors lost Marc Gasol and Serge Ibaka during the offseason, thus degrading their front line, and in November it was announced that they were going to play their home games in Florida instead of Toronto due to COVID until further notice. Still, most experts were expecting them to make the playoffs with ease, but that's not the case so far. Kyle Lowry's not getting any younger, no one but Fred VanVleet is stepping up, and despite the fact that they don't really suck at any of the statistical categories, they don't really excel at none either. It's also quite interesting to mention that they've lost half of their games by a margin of 5 or fewer points, so they have a hard time closing the games. The Eastern Conference is enjoying some additional star power this year, but still feels like a walk in the park compared to the Wild West, so the Raptors are probably going to at least make it to the play-in tournament, but unfortunately, they're not exactly one of the most intriguing teams to watch anymore. The New Orleans Pelicans, on the other hand, are one of the most exciting teams to watch. They're so gifted offensively, with Lonzo's flashy passes and Zion's explosiveness and Brandon Ingram's ever-growing game, but their young core needs to play some defense too. To be fair, they were only projected to fight for a playoff spot, and they're still in contention, especially having in mind that Stan Van Gundy, an acclaimed defensive-minded coach, can't be happy with their defensive lack of effort so far. The Pelicans haven't managed to play consistent basketball so far this season, and they haven't been great against the elite teams. They haven't exactly been disappointing, of course, but given their fairly easy early schedule and their talented young core, they could and should have been higher in the standings. The last team to make the underperformers list are the Washington Wizards, that currently sit comfortably at the bottom of the entire league. But similar to the New Orleans Pelicans, they were only expected to contend for a playoff spot and, furthermore, have had a strong excuse as to why they're underperforming so far, since they had to take a 2-week hiatus from play due to multiple players getting the coronavirus. But being the worst team in the league while they're running the floor like the Flash, having Bradley Beal disguised as Superman offensively, and having Westbrook almost averaging a triple-double once again, seems bizarre. Not surprisingly though, it's a matter of lack of defense, and the fact that they're more like a group of players that mostly care for their individual stats rather than an actual team. They won't make the playoffs. History is written by the victors. That's a quote often accredited to Winston Churchill that really fits the narrative here. Let's now focus on them, the victors, the overachievers of this early NBA season, starting with the Utah Jazz. The Jazz have already won 11 consecutive games this season, and they've constantly been in the top spot of the Western Conference standings and the entire league for that matter. Most pundits were expecting them to be good, but they weren't expecting them to be that good. But why not? They have an excellent system, an elite coaching staff, with Quinn Snyder being named Coach of the Month in the Western Conference in December and January. They have a great team chemistry as their core's been playing together for years. They move the ball well, and they're exquisite at shooting the three ball. They also have the best shot blocker in the league in Rudy Gobert and one exciting young star in Donovan Mitchell, and they're currently probably the most balanced team around. They'll finish high in the West, but are they really a title contender against the Lakers and the Clippers? That remains to be seen. Similar to the Jazz, the Philadelphia 76ers were projected to be a good team, but they've so far exceeded what was expected of them, constantly being around the top of the East. They're one of the best defensive teams in the league. They've managed to stay relatively healthy. The additions of Seth Curry and Danny Green have also proven vital. Tobias Harris has elevated his game, and while Simmons' stats have regressed a bit, he's way more efficient this year and more focused on his playmaking duties. But the main reason the 76ers are overperforming right now is Joel Embiid. The Cameroonian center is averaging career-high points per game while playing almost career-high minutes per game. His shooting is excellent. He keeps grabbing a ton of boards, and being a major defensive presence in the post, last but not least, he mostly manages to stay out of foul trouble. Philadelphia is going to be one of the best Eastern Conference teams this year, but when the time comes, it's unlikely that they'll be up for the major challenge, overcoming the star-packed Brooklyn Nets, the multifaceted Boston Celtics, and Giannis's Milwaukee Bucks. The San Antonio Spurs didn't make the cut last year after having made the playoffs for a record-tying 22 consecutive years. As a franchise, they've only missed the playoffs 5 times and 2 under the helm of the great Greg Popovich. The last time they missed the playoffs, Keldon Johnson, one of their leading scorers this season, wasn't even born, and the whole world was, well, such a different place. But let's go back to the Spurs, which are back themselves, adapting their pace and their style to play to the modern standards, making the most out of young players like the aforementioned Johnson, DeJounte Murray and Lonnie Walker, and actually making the most out of their whole roster, with 8 players having double-digit scoring averages. That's not a team, that's an orchestra, and Greg Popovich is the ultimate conductor. Are they going to make the playoffs this year? They weren't expecting to, but right now this seems quite probable, and it would definitely be considered overperforming if it happens, given the ridiculous, once again, strength and depth of the Western Conference. Ohio might not be a kingdom, but the Cleveland Cavaliers are definitely in need of a king, as the last time they reached the playoffs without being led by LeBron James was way back in 1998. But while they don't have a king anymore, they have no shortage of Knights of the Round Table. In fact, the team has a dynamic duo of young, talented guards that are both enjoying a career year so far in Darius Garland and Colin Sexton, with the latter being a strong candidate for becoming an all-star this year. Furthermore, and especially since the 4-team blockbuster trade that brought Harden to Brooklyn, the Cavs have by far the strongest old-school frontline in all basketball, with Andre Drummond, Larry Nance Jr., the newcomer Jarrett Allen, and JaVale McGee. And we shouldn't forget that Kevin Love has only played a couple of games so far this season. Cleveland is a team that combines youth and enthusiasm with efficiency and experience, but most pundits were expecting them preseason to be a mediocre team once again this year. And they were wrong, as the Cavs are definitely in the playoff picture, and if they improve their pace and their offense, they're definitely going to at least make the play-in tournament. The way the Houston Rockets have stepped up after losing James Harden has earned them an overachievers badge so far this season. They were a mystery for most of us before the season started, as it was known that James Harden didn't want to be a part of the organization anymore, that he was going to be traded at some point, and when that happened, many believed that the team would tank this season. And guess what? They were wrong once again, as players such as John Wall, Victor Oladipo, Eric Gordon and DeMarcus Cousins, despite the fact that he's not his old self anymore, are still great players, extremely gifted, and they use their basketball ego in a positive manner and help the team respond, getting wins and climbing the Western Conference standings. We shouldn't neglect to mention Christian Wood's improvement, as he's one of the strongest candidates for Most Improved Player of the Year. The Rockets are lately one of the strongest teams in the league defensively, allowing just 1 point per possession to their opponents. They're rebounding well, their pace is excellent, and if they keep playing like this, they'll too be making the play-in tournament when the regular season comes to an end. And that's all for now. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section below, and if you enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that bell notification. Until next time.